The village square buzzed with whispers as the elders gathered beneath the ancient baobab tree. Nen, the widow of Chief Okoro, knelt before them, her dark eyes glistening with unshed tears. Accusations flew like arrows. Her husband had been found dead in his hut, his body cold, his lips blackened. The village murmured of poison, of betrayal, of a wife who had turned against her own. The chief's brother Obinna stepped forward, his voice a thunderous decree. By our laws, Nen must bathe in the river of judgment. If she is innocent, the waters will cleanse her. If she is guilty, they will cast her out. Hello, please share, like, comment on this story and subscribe to our YouTube channel to enable us grow. And thanks for showing us your support for this channel. Also hit the notification bell to get notified when a new video drops. God bless you. Nen's heart pounded as the verdict was sealed. The river was no ordinary stream. It was said to be the dwelling place of the ancestors, a sacred force that revealed hidden truths. She clenched her fists, knowing she had not killed her husband, but the river's will was beyond human understanding. As the crowd dragged her toward the riverbank, the wind shifted, whispering secrets only she could hear. Flanked by guards and followed by a crowd of villagers, Nen walked the winding path to the river. The journey was long, cutting through the dense rainforest where ancient spirits were said to dwell. Each step felt heavier, as though unseen eyes were watching, waiting. The villagers carried wooden torches, their flames casting eerie shadows on the trees. Women clutched their children close, muttering prayers to the gods. Ahead the river roared, a living entity, neither friend nor foe, only judge. Nen's childhood friend Aduni fought her way through the crowd, her eyes pleading. "I do not believe this. You are no murderer," she whispered fiercely. Nen swallowed the lump in her throat. "Then pray the river believes me too," she murmured as they approached the water's edge. Nen stood at the riverbank, her feet sinking into the cool, wet earth. The river stretched before her, dark and endless, its surface rippling as if whispering secrets to the wind. The elders formed a half-circle behind her, their faces unreadable. The villagers watched in hushed anticipation, their eyes wide with fear and curiosity. This was no ordinary trial. It was the will of the gods. The priestess, draped in a robe of woven cowrie shells, raised her staff. "Nen, if your hands are clean, the river will embrace you. But if they are stained with blood, it will reject you." Her voice was like the rustling of ancient leaves. A cold wind rose from the water, and Nen shivered. She had no choice. Slowly she stepped forward, her reflection shimmering in the water, until the ripples distorted it, warping her face into something unfamiliar. Nen took a deep breath and stepped into the river. The coldness wrapped around her ankles like unseen hands, pulling her in. The villagers gasped as she waded deeper, the water rising to her waist. Suddenly, the river churned violently, waves crashing against the shore though there was no wind. The priestess's eyes widened. "The ancestors are awake." Then came the voices, whispers from the deep, speaking in a tongue older than the village itself. Nen's chest tightened. The water felt alive, pressing against her skin, probing her soul. She dared not move, dared not breathe, as the river seemed to judge her. And then a scream tore through the air, not from her lips but from the water itself. The water around Nen turned red, swirling like spilled blood. Gasps erupted from the crowd. "She is guilty," someone cried. But the priestess silenced them with a raised hand. "No, this is not the river's rejection. This is something else." The red liquid moved, forming symbols on the surface, ancient marks that only the priestess could read. Her face darkened. "The ancestors speak," she murmured. There is a deeper betrayal here. Suddenly, the river erupted in a burst of light, and a shadow rose from the depths. A figure cloaked in mist, its voice a wailing echo. "The true killer walks among you," it moaned. Panic spread through the crowd. The trial was no longer about Nen. It was about uncovering the truth. The spirit turned its hollow eyes toward the crowd, scanning them one by one. Nen, still in the water, could barely breathe. Then the shadow spoke again. He was betrayed by the one he called brother. A collective gasp filled the air. Eyes darted toward Obinna, the late chief's brother. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but he forced a sneer. "Lies. The river deceives." But the priestess pointed her staff at him. "The river does not lie. Obinna, do you deny that you were last seen with Chief Okoro before his death?" Murmurs spread like wildfire. Obinna took a step back, his fingers twitching. "This is madness." But the river surged forward, spilling onto the shore, reaching for him like accusing hands. The truth was out. Obinna turned and ran. The villagers shouted, chasing after him, but the river had its own justice. A sudden wave rose from nowhere, crashing onto the land, pulling him back with an unseen force. He screamed, thrashing as the water wrapped around him, dragging him toward the depths. "Mercy!" he cried, but the ancestors had made their decision. Nen watched in frozen shock as Obinna's struggling figure disappeared beneath the surface. The river calmed once more, its message clear. The villagers trembled, their beliefs shaken. They had been ready to condemn an innocent woman while the real murderer stood among them. The priestess turned to Nen. "You have been judged. You are free." The village was silent that night. The elders gathered in the chief's hut, their faces grave. "We must honor the river's wisdom," one said. "We almost committed a terrible sin." The priestess nodded. "This is a lesson. Justice is not always what we assume." Nen sat outside her home, staring at the stars. Laduni sat beside her, gripping her hand. "You were brave," she whispered. Nen smiled faintly. "No, the river was." She exhaled, the weight of the ordeal finally lifting. Justice had been served, but the village would never forget. And neither would she. The morning after the trial, the village awoke to an eerie stillness. The river had spoken, but its judgment left wounds that would take time to heal. Women gathered in small circles, whispering about the night's events, while men sat in the chief's courtyard, discussing what should be done. Chief Okoro's body had been laid to rest, but his murderer, his own brother, had been swallowed by the sacred waters. Nen, now free, walked through the village with Aduni at her side. Some villagers avoided her gaze, ashamed of their haste to condemn her. Others looked at her with newfound respect. She had faced the river's wrath and survived. That made her different. That made her chosen. The village council met beneath the sacred baobab tree, their voices hushed but firm. "We nearly killed an innocent woman," one elder admitted, shaking his head. "Had it not been for the river's intervention, our hands would be stained with her blood." The priestess stood among them, her gaze piercing. "This trial has shown us that our traditions, though sacred, must not blind us. The river speaks, but we must listen wisely." The eldest among them, Baba Ife, turned to the gathered villagers. "From this day forth, the river's judgment shall not replace our own. We will seek truth with wisdom before demanding the spirits intervene." A murmur of agreement spread through the crowd. Justice must be served, but never again at the cost of blind accusation. Nen had the choice to remain in the village or leave behind the place that had nearly condemned her. Aduni sat with her by the river, where the water now ran calm and clear. "Will you stay?" Aduni asked, her voice gentle. "You have the right to leave, to start anew somewhere else." Nen stared at the water, listening to its soft murmurs. "This is my home," she said finally. "If I run, I let fear win. But if I stay, I help change the way our people seek justice." She turned to Aduni with a determined look. "I will stay. And I will make sure no woman faces what I did again." Nen's decision to stay did not go unnoticed. The priestess sought her out, watching her from a distance before approaching. "You have been touched by the river," she said. "Not many survive its trial and remain unchanged." Nen met her gaze. "What does that mean?" The priestess smiled knowingly. "It means you are meant for more than an ordinary life. You have a voice now, a voice the village will listen to." She placed a carved wooden staff in Nen's hands. "Walk with wisdom, and the ancestors will guide you." The weight of the staff felt powerful, a symbol of something greater than herself. Days later, Nen called the village women together, something that had never been done before. They gathered in a quiet clearing, curiosity shining in their eyes. "We have always been silent," she began. "We have watched our daughters accused, our sisters blamed, and our voices dismissed. But no more." The women murmured in agreement. Some looked afraid. Change was dangerous. But others, like Aduni, stood taller, their spirits ignited. "From today we will ensure fairness before accusations. We will demand proof before judgment. We will protect our own." The fire in their eyes told Nen she was not alone in this fight. Word of the women's gathering spread. Some men scoffed, dismissing it as idle talk. But others listened, especially the elders, who had witnessed the near tragedy of Nen's trial. Changes began subtly. Accusations were met with investigation, not immediate punishment. The priestess, too, lent her support, ensuring that justice was tempered with wisdom. Nen walked through the village, feeling the shift. Where once she had been scorned, now she was respected. Where once she had been silenced, now she was heard. It would take time, but the village was learning. And that was enough. One night, Nen dreamed of the river. The water shimmered like silver, and the spirits of the ancestors stood upon its surface. One stepped forward, its voice an echo of ages past. "Beware, child of the river. Not all will welcome change." She awoke with a start, heart pounding. The river had given her justice, but it had also given her responsibility. Not all in the village would accept the shift in power, and some might seek to silence her. The battle for fairness had only just begun. The warning proved true. One night, as Nen returned from the priestess's hut, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned sharply, but the path was empty. Yet the feeling of being watched lingered. Someone did not want her to change the village. Aduni found her the next morning, looking troubled. "We must be careful," she warned. "Not everyone is ready for a different way." Nen squared her shoulders. "Then we will show them it is the right way." One evening, a group of men approached Nen in the marketplace. "Women should not speak of justice," one spat. "It is the work of men." Nen met his gaze without fear. And yet, it was men who condemned an innocent woman. "It was the river who proved you wrong." Murmurs spread through the crowd. The priestess stepped forward. "Change is here whether you welcome it or not. Adapt or be left behind." The men hesitated, but the shifting mood of the village was clear. Nen had won the people. Despite the villagers' growing support, shadows still lurked in the village. One night, Nen woke to the sound of rustling outside her hut. Gripping the wooden staff the priestess had given her, she crept to the door. The moonlight revealed a figure slipping into the darkness, a warning or perhaps a final attempt to silence her. The next morning, the priestess called a gathering. "There are those who fear change," she said. "But fear cannot halt the river's course." She looked at Nen, her eyes filled with both pride and concern. "You must stand firm. The village is watching, and the ancestors are with you." Nen felt the weight of those words. This was no longer just her fight. It was for all the women, and for the future of the village itself. The elders called for a gathering in the square, one last debate to determine if the village would formally change its ways. The men who had opposed Nen sat in a row, their arms crossed. One of them, Dyke, stepped forward. "Our laws have served us for generations. Why change now?" Nen did not flinch. "Because justice is not about tradition, it is about truth. The river itself showed us that." She turned to the villagers. "If we had listened to reason first, the river would not have needed to intervene." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. The chief's eldest advisor rose. "Then let it be decided. No one shall be condemned without proof. The river's judgment shall be sacred, but not the first answer. Let wisdom guide us." The vote was cast. By the time the sun set, the village had spoken. Justice had changed forever. Days later, Nen returned to the river alone. The waters were calm, their surface shimmering in the light of dawn. She knelt by the edge, dipping her hands into the cool current. "Thank you," she whispered. The river had tested her, but it had also saved her. A soft breeze carried a voice, not from the wind, but from the water itself. "Walk with wisdom, child of the river. Your path is only beginning." She smiled. The spirits were watching. The ancestors approved. And with that she stood tall, ready for whatever came next. Years passed, and Nen became more than just a woman who survived the river. She became a leader, a voice for justice. The village remembered her story, passing it down through generations. No woman was ever falsely accused again without proof. And when the river called upon others, it was not for blind judgment, but for wisdom. The waters remained sacred, not as a tool of fear, but as a guide for truth. The river had spoken, and the village had listened. The village nearly condemned an innocent woman based on fear and tradition. True justice requires wisdom, patience, and evidence, not blind accusations. Fear of change should not hinder progress. Many resisted Nen's fight for fairness, but progress often faces opposition. Change is necessary for growth, and courage is needed to challenge outdated beliefs. The truth will always reveal itself. Despite deception and betrayal, the river's judgment exposed the real killer. Lies may prosper for a time, but the truth cannot remain hidden forever. Women's voices matter in justice and leadership. Nen's strength transformed the village's laws, proving that women deserve to be heard and respected in matters of justice and governance. Tradition should evolve with wisdom. The village honored its customs, but they learned that traditions must serve fairness, not blind punishment. Wisdom must guide customs to ensure they serve all people justly. To see how this story unfolds, like, share and subscribe to the channel, and write where you are watching from. Only on African Tales by DeFloras. Thank you.